In this video, I want to go over a few techniques for downers or downshifters that are more aimed at electronic music production rather than trailer music or trailer sound effects. So similar to my last video where we talked about risers, because the main techniques are quite similar, but again, sonically, we're looking just for something a bit different. So I'm starting with the default preset in Vital. I'm just going to quickly create the basic setup for a typical downer. So let's change this oscillator to a sine wave. And now we just want to use either an envelope or an LFO to modulate the pitch. And I'm going to use LFO1 on the global pitch so that oscillators that I might add later are automatically also pitched down. So just LFO1 here, global voice transpose. And let's set this to 2 octaves for now. And now we can change the shape of this LFO to something like this. So the pitch is going downwards. And we can also set this to envelope mode and make this at least 1 bar long. And now we have a very basic downer like this. Obviously, this doesn't sound that interesting, so you might want to add some more movement or add more frequency content to this. So for movement, we could use another LFO and just put this on the level of our oscillator here. And let's increase the tempo here a bit. And then we get some volume modulation like this, which makes it a bit more interesting. But let's also add another oscillator with a waveform that contains a bit more higher frequencies and put the same LFO on the level there as well. Let's also give this one a few voices and detune it a bit so it's a bit wider. Still, you might want to add some effects here. So maybe distort it a bit, compress it as well, and maybe some reverb at the end. But you probably want to look for maybe a different waveform to give it just a bit of a more interesting character. So maybe something like this. You can also use different warp functions to change the sound of this waveform a bit more. Also modulate this with one of these LFOs here. Obviously, you can also change the shape of this. So something that also can work very well is a shape like this. Pretty much the same as for our pitch envelope. So obviously you can play around with this a lot, different waveforms and different effects and different shapes here. But one of the main things with these typical downshifters that you hear a lot in electronic tracks is noise. So maybe let's deactivate these for now and just activate the sampler down here with the white noise. There are different ways to create this sort of downshifting movement with noise. Within Vital, you can pitch this sample down. So one possible way would be to just use LFO1 on the pitch of this sampler here, pitch it down. Let's do it 2 octaves. And we're going to start at the original pitch and then it's just going to pitch the sample down. But still, this doesn't really sound that great. So what typically works better with noise is if you use a filter and again use the same LFO on the cutoff of this. And we want to use quite a bit of resonance here and also route the sampler through it. So this is more the kind of thing that you would probably hear. And you can also use our LFO2 again on the level of this to give it the same movement as before. You can also make this a bit wider by using delay and making use of the house effect here. So let's just set this to stereo mode and seconds, and then just delay one side a bit, mix 100%, feedback to 0, and now we have a really wide white noise. But what you can also do is just browse through the different noise samples here, and for a lot of these, and especially for the ones that are not pure noise, this pitch modulation here is going to work a lot better. Something that's also a nice technique for downers is if you modulate the frequency of the LFO that modulates the volume here so that these movements get slower as the pitch gets lower. And we can use LFO1 for this because it has the exact curve that we need for this. Let's just use LFO1 and put this on the frequency of LFO2 here. And we can set LFO2 to seconds now. Just give this a bit of range here. Now you can create stuff like this. Which also makes it sound a bit more natural. We can of course also play all of these together and see how this sounds. Something that also works well for white noise is using a comb filter to give it more tonality. So we can also do this here with this filter in addition to the other filter. So let's just choose one of the comb filters here. And we can also use, again, the same LFO here on the cutoff. And let's maybe also try morphing this filter a bit and give it a bit of resonance. And then just browse for the different filters here and see which works best for you. So you can get a lot of different variations by doing this, and you don't necessarily have to use any volume automation. You can also import your own samples here and see if you find something that works. If you have longer samples like atmospheres or drones and stuff like that, you can just throw it in there and see what happens if you have like all these effects set up and all the modulations here. So I just wanted to give a very quick overview of a few techniques, and I hope this helps you a bit and gives you a bit of a better idea of what you can do to create these kinds of downshifters.